Coming up, we are just one day away from Election Day, deciding the next president of the United States. We'll hear from people to talk about that. America's Hope starts now.
This is America's Hope from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Kelly Wright.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Wright. Welcome to a brand new edition of America's Hope. I'm glad you could stop by. I really do appreciate you. And wherever you are, I hope that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. And you matter most notably now to two people who are running for president. Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, as well as the former President of the United States, Donald Trump. We're just a day away from all Americans getting out to the polls to elect the next president and determine the course of America's future. So we're going to be talking to Senator Tim Scott, a man who knows both candidates. He knows Kamala Harris, having served with her as a U.S. Senator when she served as a senator. And then he also knows the former President of the United States, Donald Trump, because he helped former President of the United States, Donald Trump, with opportunity zones. He'll be joining us tonight. And then we'll be talking to Oz Guinness, a man who looks at America as a missionary to America, as a man who loves America, and he will encourage us to keep hope for America. Let's get started. And welcome to our special program, Senator Tim Scott. You're a successful small businessman and U.S. Senator from South Carolina. You grew up in a poor single-parent household and made it your mission to positively impact or affect the lives of more than 1 billion people through your message of hope and opportunity. In having this discussion tonight, you're the first African American to be elected to both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate since Reconstruction. That is quite an accomplishment, and you currently serve on the Senate Committee on Finance, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, and the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. My, oh my, you're busy for a U.S. Senator. But I got to ask you, you support President Donald Trump, and by working in these roles as a U.S. Senator, you could have easily become the vice presidential pick. Did you have any qualms about that at all when you were not selected?
You know, I'm a big believer that Romans 8:28, all these things somehow work together for good for those who love God and call according to his purpose. And I got to tell you, I couldn't be happier to be where I am, who I am, and doing what I get to do. I think it's a blessing from the Lord that I have the privilege of taking on the responsibilities of banking and finance that will have a disproportionate impact on communities of color like where I've come from. Some people are born into a middle-class family in the Black community. Some are born into wealthy families within the Black community, but too many of us start out in poverty like I did. So having a chance to try to rewrite and reframe the issues of finance and financial inclusion for this nation is a blessing from the good Lord. So I'm really thankful that at the end of the day, I am exactly where the Lord has placed me.
And Senator, you've had a lot of notable accomplishments along those lines in helping a lot of these communities that you've just talked about. A lot of them are underserved communities, Black communities and inner cities and rural areas. What's your message in terms of making sure that President Trump espouses these programs and continues to help you if he's elected as the next president of the United States?
Well, Kelly, one of the reasons why I'm supporting President Trump is because promises made to me were promises that he actually kept. Let me run through just 4 or 5 different areas where we work together for the betterment of all of America, but specifically those folks growing up like I did. Number one, my Opportunity Zone legislation. Opportunity Zone legislation has brought over $80 billion into the poorest communities, disproportionately, majority, minority, and the impact of that has been less than 5% gentrification, so we're not running people out of the community. Number 2, it has been faster wage growth in those communities. Number 3, an increase in property values. All done with private sector dollars and not a government program. So what does that teach us? It teaches us that there's a way for us to address the issue of poverty without eliminating the land and the property owned by people living there, but at the same time, investing. Second thing I'd say is on HBCUs. President Trump was the first president in the history of America to make HBCU funding permanent. No longer every year do they have to come and ask for the resources necessary. Number three, he took the money to the highest level possible, record-breaking level. Number four, during COVID, he eliminated, erased over $1 billion of HBCU debt. Number five, the first criminal justice reform done since the 90s. In the 90s, led by Democratic efforts, Democrats in Congress, led the effort to try to find a way to make our streets safer by locking up disproportionately African Americans. I assume they had good intentions, to be honest with you. The result of that legislation has devastated a lot of black males specifically. President Trump came back in and rewrote the First Step Act, which actually said, just because someone's mad at you doesn't make you a danger to society. He said in the legislative intent that our goal is to make sure that people have better training, better job skills, better education, and more mental health assistance for those who need it. That has recalibrated our justice system in a positive way. I can't thank President Trump enough for listening when I brought those legislative priorities that I had to him. So I'm supporting him because he's already done great things. And finally, in 2017, we wrote the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I was given the privilege of spearheading for the Senate the personal side of the tax code. I took into consideration my mother, a single parent, raising 2 kids. We cut her taxes by 70% on the federal level, giving single mothers more resources, breathes new hope into those families. And so for those reasons, I continue to support President Trump. And I look forward to the next round of lower taxes for single mothers, more resources for small businesses, particularly in minority communities, and frankly, school choice. Every child deserves a chance. That means every parent must have a choice.
And Senator, for all the aforementioned accomplishments that you've just named on your behalf, as well as the Trump administration when he served as president, do you think that's why so many black men are rallying around him and supporting him? Because black men have become a focal point of this election, as you know, with black men coming out in support of the former president, and there are those who are in support of Vice President Kamala Harris. You know both of them.
Yes.
And having worked with both of them, what would be your message to black men in America for this discussion?
You know, Kelly, I think the simple question that every American, and in particular black males, should be asking themselves is, am I better off in the past 4 years, or was I better off in the 4 years of Donald Trump's administration? Look, Kelly, it's really clear. Bidenomics has been a failure for the black community. The bottom line is simply this: the average family is losing more than $1,100 of spending power per month because Bidenomics led to hyperinflation. Hyperinflation led to a devastation of spending power. Gas is 50% more, food is 30% more, providing heat or cool air in your home, 30% more. Why? Because under President Biden, he spent trillions of dollars, leading to the highest inflation we've seen since the Jimmy Carter years. Under President Trump, inflation under 2%. He grew wages, Trump grew wages at the bottom quintile faster than the top quintile. That means that people working paycheck to paycheck were better off in the Trump economy than in the Biden economy. And Kamala Harris has said it clearly. She would not change a single thing, period, of what Biden did. I haven't even gotten to the fact that the Venezuelan gangs that are coming across our southern border are devastating Hispanic and black neighborhoods first. I haven't gotten to the place where we're talking about the 70,000 Americans who's lost their lives because of an open southern border. Kamala Harris was going to close that border. President Trump actually did. I'm not talking about the energy costs or it being energy dominant. There are a lot of other issues that Black Americans care about and that all of Americans care about. Unfortunately, the vice president has failed on those important issues.
Are you at
Yes.
all concerned about some of the things that the president has stated with regard to Detroit and some of the disparaging things that have been said along the campaign trail?
Yeah, I find much of what we hear in the political run up to the end of the election to be questionable, not on President Trump's side merely, but on every side. I think Kamala Harris, someone yelled in her crowd the other day, "Jesus is Lord," and she yelled back, "You're in the wrong rally." That's challenging.
Did that surprise you? Because, as I said, this is someone you know.
It disappointed me. It definitely disappointed me. I'll also say, with her comments about religious freedoms and religious liberties and religious exemptions, she said she'd have none of that in her administration. That's devastating. Listen, the heartbeat of the Black community and, frankly, of the foundation of America that led us in the right direction is the church. The Judeo-Christian foundation of this nation and in our community is so vitally important. And saying that Catholic hospitals and organizations of faith, you cannot make decisions based on your faith. You're going to do what the government tells you to do, even if it violates your personal integrity, character, or religious direction. So on the exact opposite side, President Trump has said clearly he's going to continue to support our First Amendment rights. And when you look at the contrast, there are a lot of things in this. President Trump and I had the first tussle over Charlottesville. And at the end of the day, we created opportunity zones because he was willing to listen to what I had to say after something that I found objectionable, clearly stated. So what I found with President Trump is he may not always say it in the way that people love. He is willing to listen, to work together, and to make life better for those negatively impacted by either his words then or other people's actions. And I'm talking specifically about making up for the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris 4 years of devastation to poor families around this country.
You are the author of a best-selling book called America, The Redemption Story, Choosing Hope, Creating Unity. Hope is something that resonates with many of Americans who say that it's been downtrodden and stepped upon when it should be at a point of prevailing. Based on what you know about President Trump, the former president, as well as Vice President Kamala Harris, and based on your own DNA, the man that you've become through your blood, sweat, and tears and hard work, and your message to Black men at this hour in terms of determining who will be the next president.
I failed out of high school as a freshman because I was hopeless. I can tell you that our faith should not be found in politicians, to be honest with you. It should be found in the Lord. So that's the first message I would tell every single African-American male, as well as the rest of our country. Second thing I'd say is, don't take my word for it. Don't take Kamala Harris's word for it. Don't take Donald Trump's word for it. Do a little homework and compare 2017 up until COVID 2020. Compare that to what you've experienced in the last 3 years. Look at your neighborhoods, look at your jobs, look at your opportunity, and ask yourself, if I'm not better off now than I was under the Trump years, why wouldn't I give President Donald Trump 4 more years to do it again?
Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, thank you for joining us this hour on this special discussion of Black men being able to have a conversation about the future of America. Appreciate you so much, sir.
Thank you, Kelly. God bless. See you soon, I hope.
God bless you too. You're watching America's Hope. We're coming back with more after the break. And welcome back to America's Hope. This past week, I had the pleasure of co-moderating with Don Lemon, formerly of CNN, who now hosts the Don Lemon Show. Together, we moderated an event sponsored by Max Black Media in Washington, D.C. We spoke to Black men discussing their likes and dislikes of the presidential candidate of their choice. Some of the men support Donald Trump in becoming the next president of the United States. Others, as you might imagine, support the Vice President Kamala Harris to become the next president of the United States. But here's something that was very telling. At the end of this wonderful discussion, about their political insights and their analysis of both candidates and the direction of the country. Listen to their response to my question, what is your hope for America? I got to ask each of you, what is, based on what you're doing, what is your hope for America?
Well, I'll say this. It's everything America could be. It's a healthier America. It's America where housing's affordable. It's America where, a person could get the job they want and chase the economic dreams they want. It's an America that's safe. It's an America that still leads in the world and keeps the world safe. So it's literally the promise of America, more fulfilled, the franchise, more enabled for particularly us and our people.
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of moments in our nation's history when we've started to take some steps back. But every time the will of the people and the leaders we've had in this country have said, no, we're going to take a step forward. I think we're at a critical juncture right now in our nation's history when we have two paths ahead of us. Do we want to take the path that involves fewer rights and freedoms or more rights and freedoms? Do we want to take the path where more people can afford groceries and rent and life-saving medications, or where fewer people can? Do we want a future where we deal with one of the most existential crises facing our country, which we haven't talked about tonight, which is climate change, or a future in which we deny it and call it a hoax? Do we want a future in which the next generation, in which my future son or daughter feels like they can actually dream and aspire to something, an American dream or an American nightmare? I know which path I'm choosing, and I know which path each of you is choosing, but my hope is that next Tuesday, the will of the people will speak and will choose the path of moving forward, not back.
My vision for America is an America that puts Americans first. That means all across the board, all races. We're talking about educating our prior generations on the issues facing our next generations. That means we're placing a priority on making sure that our kids, no matter the race, no matter the economic background, have an opportunity to exceed and excel in this country. And that's from all standpoints, from financial to education. I think my vision for America is inclusive. I think there's a lot of focus on immigration right now. Obviously, we spoke a lot this evening about the border. We want a more inclusive America. We want an America that prioritizes Americans, but we also want an America that's welcoming, because migrants legally have come across this country and done great things. We want an America that is, not the savior of every other country across the world where we're sacrificing American lives with nothing in return. And I think we want an America that understands that there are some biological differences between men and women. I think we want our children to grow up understanding that, and let's just put America forward. Let's make America great again. Let's make America healthy again. And let's make sure that Black Americans and all minority Americans have the same opportunities as every other group in this country.
I want America to repair her broken faults. Alexis de Tocqueville, who came to this country to study our penal system, wrote this in his 2-volume work, Democracy for America. And he says, America is great because her people is good, but if America ever ceases to be great, then America will cease to be good. And one of the most powerful lines he said in that 2-volume work was, America's greatness is not determined because America is more enlightened than any other nation. It is because she's had a history of repairing her broken faults. We know we have fault lines in this country. And so I want America to learn to repair her broken faults, acknowledge them, repair them, so we can keep on this track towards progress and not necessarily perfection. We've always in this country had this idea of trying to make this country the best version of herself. And most occasions that has required her to take the road best traveled by, not the road less traveled by. The road best traveled by in this election is crystal clear, because I'm 39 years old, I'm from South Carolina, I'm Black, I'm a Democrat, my grandparents are sharecroppers. So I'm only 2 generations, 1.5 generations removed from slavery. So this idea of old battles becoming new and us putting fresh set of eyes on old problems, it's a real thing. I have no issues with you supporting conservatism, extremism, Trump, and all that. But I also want you as a black man to understand, like, it's okay to say, look, I don't have to walk step in step with foolishness. And people will give you grace for that. Even Republicans in your own party will give you grace for that. And I think, I'm 39, I don't know how old you are, but I've been around this business since 2004, so I've been around a long time. And I've seen this from a total different place than you have. It's okay to be on the right side of history with your community, even that means breaking with your party on stuff. And I think people have an appreciation for the authenticity that comes along with that.
I'm on the right side, thank you.
Don?
I was thinking about, what is it? I can't remember the exact quote from The Color Purple, which is something what you were saying, is that you want something that you won't have any good luck or whatever until you do right by me. Yeah. And I think that
Seeley.
And I think that's America won't have any good luck or good fortune until it does right by folks like us who are sitting in this room. So I believe in reparations. You said you believe in repair. So until America comes to a consensus about truth and facts, we can't even come to a consensus about truth and facts. Right? So my hope is that we can do that, and we can also repair the wrongs, as Antoine said, of the past. And the only way to do that is to acknowledge those wrongs, and maybe even to apologize for them. And the best way to apologize for them is to repair them through reparations. And we can do it. AI can do it, figure out how to do it in this country. And I think that's the only way forward. That's my hope, that we come to that acknowledgement.
It's been a stimulating conversation for all of us. I would say that my hope for America, we heard a lot about repair and the brokenness, and America is still suffering from a broken heart, inflicted many, many years ago before any one person or other people began to lead this nation, and we have to fix it. I would quote what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, and that is, we must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish as fools. These are all brothers up here, and we are not our brothers' killers, we are our brothers' keepers. And Isaiah 58 talks about that repair, when God says, I called you to a fast that you don't maliciously wound each other or malign each other with vicious, malicious talk, and you don't point fingers at each other and accuse each other. We've had some spirited debate, but we haven't pointed fingers to accuse each other or demean each other. That's the difference of what we saw here tonight. And that makes us repairers of the breach, so we can reach out to our brothers and say, I'm your keeper, I'm not your killer. And to our sisters as well, we're going to love you, respect you, and esteem you, and lift you up. And that goes for everybody in here, including the vice president. And we're going to pray for the former president, and we're going to pray for America to make America love again. Thank you for joining us. Black men discussing the election of 2024. And of course, tomorrow, or possibly by Wednesday or Thursday, we'll know the results of who they're voting for. Will it be the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, or will it be the current vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris? You will decide. We're coming back with much more of America's Hope in just a moment. And welcome back to America's Hope. I'm delighted to introduce our next guest. He is Dr. Oz Guinness. He is an author and social critic. And you should know this, he's the great-great-great-grandson of Arthur Guinness, the Dublin brewer. He was born in China in World War II, where his parents were medical missionaries. He is a witness to the climax of the Chinese Revolution in 1949. And he was expelled with many other foreigners in 1951, returned to Europe, where he was educated in England. He completed his undergraduate degree at the University of London and his doctorate of philosophy in the social sciences from Oriel College in Oxford. And he has written or edited more than 30 books, including The Call, Time for Truth, Unspeakable, A Free People's Suicide, The Global Public Square, Last Call for Liberty, Carpe Diem, Redeemed, and so much more. The Magna Carta of Humanity. Dr. Oz, it's good to have you on the program. What an honor to talk to you.
My privilege. Thank you, Kelly.
Well, there's so many things we can talk about. We're in the thrust, as you know, in the throes of election. How do you look at America after Election Day, regardless of who wins?
Well, I think that's a very important way of putting it, because while this election is highly consequential, and I hope there's no one who will not vote, the real task remains to be done, which is to restore the republic. Because America has a freedom like no other, uniquely. But many Americans have forgotten where it comes from. The American Republic owes everything to the Hebrew Republic, to Exodus and Deuteronomy. And we've lost that. And people talk about saving democracy. The founders were not fond of democracy. Herman Melville called it the kettle drums of hell, because it always ends up in anarchy or rule. We did found a republic. So I think the next 4 years are critical if good leaders take us back to what the republic should be.
Let me ask you, if the scenario proves to be Donald Trump being the president, what would a Trump presidency look like over the next 4 years?
It would be infinitely preferable to the alternative. But that said, when he often says, make America great again, he needs to go on to say, what made America great in the first place? Because it wasn't the military. It wasn't the economy. America's a nation by intent, ideas. So, for example, the notion of the consent of the governed comes from Exodus. The notion of constitution comes from the biblical view of covenant. And go on down the line. We need to recover those and restore that understanding, say, to civic education in public schools. So the open border is quite literally suicidal. People can become Americans just by being here a number of years, but they have no idea what it means to be American. And that is a disaster for the Republic. So he needs to restore citizenship, along with the good things he'll do in the economy and the military.
And what does a presidency by Kamala Harris look like?
I'm not American. I'm a great admirer of this country, but I think another spell of the Biden-Harris administration would be the end of the Republic. What you've seen in the last generation is a hollowing out of traditional liberalism, and it's merging with radicalism and the rise of cultural Marxism following the so-called Long March through the institutions. So if that is cemented by one more administration, the open border policy and the idea in this from say, Puerto Rico and so on, these things would add up to the death of the Republic. And as a non-American, an admirer, I would say, for Americans to squander this heritage of freedom in one generation would be an absolute tragedy, but not just for America, but for the entire world, because there's nothing like it. So it's very crucial we do not have the radical left in again. But we've got to do more than just vote Republican or whatever. You've got to build back the foundations of citizenship and Republican understanding of freedom.
What you're saying is so important for Americans to hear and realize. I mean, you grew up in China, and what was that experience like? And what would be your message to America based on that lived experience?
Well, I'll never forget the day in January 1949. I was 7 when my dad said to me, "Son, we're in trouble. Chiang Kai-shek has abandoned the city. We were living in the capital, Nanking, the capital of Free China, and we're at the mercy of the Red Army." In they came. I was there under the reign of terror for 2 more years, and my parents for another 2. So I left China with a vivid realism about Marxism and about evil. And I always say, their revolutions never succeed, their oppressions never end, and their promises never arrive. And Americans to be naive about the inroads of cultural Marxism, critical race theory, critical gender theory, and all that is an incredible naivety. We must open our eyes. What's at stake is monumental for the world, for freedom, for humanity, and certainly for the American Republic too.
Many people, when they hear these reports about Marxism and the growing trends towards that in America, they refuse to recognize it for whatever reason. It could be ignorance, it could be benign neglect, or it could be actually on purpose. But when you see our government moving towards that, and when you see that people are actually pushing for that from the progressive left side, and then even the extremities on the far right side, it seems like there's a clash that's coming that's just beyond cultural and it's beyond political. It's also indicative of spiritual. What do you believe is the spiritual aspect of the fight that we have in America between left and right, good and evil?
Well, Marxism and many of the other ideologies are fundamentally supernatural. In other words, they are a matter of faith, and that's why they're so deadly. They're not just political. And the trouble is, many Americans don't think in terms of first principle. I mentioned MAGA. You could say Biden talks about restoring the soul of America, but he never says what it is. So often today, Americans are thinking piecemeal. I call it a game of whack-a-mole. A scandal here, protest there, an outrage over wherever, and we respond to them all one by one. And many people don't realize the deep polarization in the country is from one thing. There's a profound difference between those who understand America and freedom from the perspective of the American Revolution, which, as I said, was largely biblical, and those who understand American freedom from the perspective of ideas coming down from the French Revolution. So you think Lincoln, a house divided cannot stand. You can't be half slave, half free. So what I'm saying to America as an admirer, you can't be half the American Revolution and half the French Revolution. You got to choose between them. It's like the time of Elijah. You can't worship Baal and the Lord. You got to choose. You can't sit on the fence. And so we need leaders today who will set out the choice and challenge Americans to that fundamental choice. Moses did it. Elijah did it. Lincoln did it. Churchill did it. And we need leaders like that today who are more than politicians, they're statesmen.
And let's get beyond politics for a minute. I realize that government leadership is important for this country. We are a constitutional republic. And it's important for people to understand that because of that, we are governed by the people and for the people and of the people. Having said that, Oz, it seems that when we state that, that means in addition to our government leaders being held accountable and those of us in this country being ordered biblically to pray for our leaders, isn't it also responsible upon all of us as citizens of this constitutional republic to not only pray for our leaders, but help lead and guide our leaders by actively being a voice of reason in a chaotic, confused political construct?
Absolutely, Kelly. You put it well. I put it like this talking to Americans. What is the most famous American saying about democracy? You quoted it, Lincoln. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, by the people, self-government. But many people don't realize Lincoln was quoting. He was quoting a pastor in his own time, but the pastor was quoting John Wycliffe, the early reformer in the 14th century. And Wycliffe was actually saying, it was his preface to an English version of the Bible. We got to get the Bible out of the hands of the establishment, the clergy, put it back in everyone's hands so they can live by the Bible. And then you can have, Wycliffe said, government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now we've lost that. So as you rightly pushed me back, government is not just the government in terms of Washington, D.C. or the state capitals. It's us, or in the terms of the Constitution, we the people. And that's part of the originality of the biblical understanding. So one feature of the Hebrew Republic is what they call the reciprocal responsibility of everyone for everyone. They were making a covenant with the Lord, but with each other. So you love your neighbor as yourself. You love the stranger because you were strangers, and so on. You think of the old Three Musketeers, one for all and all for one. That should be America. So Christians who don't vote, that's a failure of discipleship. It's a failure of citizenship. Every single American is responsible for the American Republic. It is everyone at every level. And that's a challenge today because a lot of Christians are disengaging. Some have gone to the other extreme of politicizing everything, and that's bad. But too many Christians have disengaged.
I'm talking to Dr. Oz Guinness, and I'm enjoying this conversation. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more about how do we get Christians and all Americans to get re-engaged, to reconnect, and actually restart this great nation of ours. Back in just a moment. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm having a wonderful conversation with Dr. Oz Guinness. And Oz, I hope it's not the first or the last conversation that we have. I pray for many more opportunities to talk to you. You look at America with so much admiration. I think it's refreshing to hear that. You remind me of a dear friend of mine from Africa who is constantly calling me saying, how are you guys doing? How's America going? Or a friend of mine from Barbados who says, you know, America is the greatest nation on the planet, but it has to start acting like it and recognizing it. So who do we pick up the phone and call, Oz, when we've got to make a 911 call for the resuscitation of American values?
Well, you need Americans who really understand what America is about, just as we who follow Jesus. We got to know who we believe in, what we believe, and why we believe what we believe. Otherwise, we can't share it or really live it out well. Well, the same is true of those of you who are Americans. You've got to know the best of what America is. Of course, that means facing up to the worst too and putting it right. You know, the great thing about the Bible, there is no airbrushing of sins and flaws, including leaders. The greatest king was a murderer and an adulterer, David, and so on. So there's got to be a recognition and a reckoning, say, with slavery and racism. But that said, the great thing about the Christian faith and the Jewish faith, sins and evils can be put right, and you can have a second chance. And the idea that, as we say, every sinner has a future and every saint has a past, that's made possible by forgiveness. So we do need forgiveness for what's wrong. But Americans should glory in what is right. Because truly, when you look at the notions like human dignity, nothing like it in history, or freedom, justice, words, truth, peace, covenant, the biblical foundations for politics are unrivaled. And we're the heirs of that. So for those of us who are Christians, we say it's the gospel, the best news. It is the best news ever. And we should be champions of it.
Yeah, indeed, it is the best news ever, the good news. And I'm a strong proponent of talking about the good news in a bad news world. As you were talking, Oz, you reminded me of Isaiah 58, where the Jewish people are fasting and they're upset with God because he says God's not recognizing us. And then God sent the message to them through Isaiah. I haven't called you to a fast where you point fingers at each other or wound each other with malicious talk. I've called you to be repairers of the breach so that you can restore streets of dwelling. We have not done that well in our political speak, where we've demonized each other on all sides. You alluded to the fact that sometimes our politics gets way, way far afield of actually understanding that we are our brother's keeper, not our brother's killer. And that's even with words, Oz. How do we heal from this?
Oh, Kelly, you're exactly right. Put it like this. In the scriptures, words created the entire world. And in our human world, words create worlds, words can destroy worlds. And the Old Testament has a tough view of words and bad words, which is called evil speech. And if you know, the rabbis say that evil speech, bullying, insulting, gossip, and so on, is tantamount to blasphemy and tantamount to murder. So you look at America today, and again, I'm an umpire and an outsider. We have trivialized words through advertising. Subaru means love. Come on. We have weaponized words in politics. Take, say, the way the Democrats are talking about Trump as Hitler now. And we have dehumanized words in the social media with trolling and so on. And so, as Jacques Ellul, a great Christian thinker, says, to save humanity, today we've got to save words. So Christians should be people who use words with respect and regard to truth and with love, even for our enemies. And so our yes is yes and our no is no, and so on. No lies, no falsehood, no conspiracy theories. We have the highest view of words. We are the guardians of the biblical, the Christian view of words. What you're saying is incredibly important.
And that stands up against misinformation and disinformation as well, and brings us to the place of actually being able to break bread together. And that's the thing that I think so many Americans really long for, to find that common ground for the common good of being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You know, wonderful statements, and the founding fathers actually believed it. They sought it, and they even fought for it, and some even died for it. And again, I know you're an outsider looking in, but this is a nation that you've chosen to call home. And what makes it so special to you to continue to live here, debate with Americans about the greatness of their nation? What compels you to do this?
Well, put simply, Kelly, the Lord called me here. So just as my parents were missionaries to China, medical missionaries, I'm a sort of missionary to America, but I rarely put it that way. But think of what you just said. We hold these truths to be self-evident. They are not self-evident to most of history. Plato said some people are gold, some are silver, some are bronze. The gold are the leaders. Aristotle, some are born to rule, some are born to be ruled. What the founders said was self-evident is only self-evident if you accept the Bible. In other words, the Jewish and Christian view. And as we undercut the foundations to the Bible, so we talked about truth. Following Nietzsche, if God is dead, truth is dead. So what are we left with? Everything's relative. Your truth, her truth, my truth, so on. But worse still, everything is only, without truth, power. And that is absolutely deadly, which leads to thinness. And why? The Romans called this the peace of despotism. You will have a conflict, and the only resolution is when you have a power so powerful it can put down every other claim to power. In other words, authoritarianism. That is the logic of where America is going. And things like the collapse of truth and the rise of conspiracy theories, lies, falsehoods, and so on, they're accelerating. So we who are followers of Jesus, Jews, and along with our Jewish friends, we should be people of truth, speaking the truth, living the truth, over against a growing culture of lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Truth matters. So Oz, as a missionary to America, what's your hope for America?
Well, my daily hope and prayer is for an awakening, because there are parts of the crisis that none of us so far can fix. We know that only the Lord can fix. You know, even a great atheist like Martin Heidegger, who wrestled all his life with the challenge of technology, finished in his last interview with the line, "Only God can save us now." Now, that's the biblical view of the Messiah. We'll never do it by ourselves. We can't become ourselves by ourselves. We can't save ourselves by ourselves. We need the Lord. We need an awakening, a revival. So my country, England, in 1725 was inches from the conditions that led to, in France, to the French Revolution. And then came revival, awakening, the first awakening, which helped the American Revolution too. So countries can be turned around. We can't do it just by ourselves. We truly need an awakening among the people of God today that is a revival.
Oz Guinness, thank you so much. Good to see you again, my friend, and to be on our program. I appreciate you. It's an honor. And I really take what you've said to heart. And it's stored here, but it's also stored in my heart. Dr. Oz Guinness, author, social critic, and a great missionary to America. Thank you, my friend. Oh, by the way, he likes the Commanders, too. Those Hail Mary passes do work, don't they, Dr. Oz? And we're back with more of America's Hope in just a moment. My good friend Oz Guinness right there. Thank you. Welcome back to America's Hope. I certainly appreciate our guests who joined us on this program, Senator Tim Scott as well as Oz Guinness, and the other people who stopped by to give their insights on what they think about the candidates who are running and who they'll be deciding on to become the next president of the United States. Bottom line is this: America will prevail before, during, and after this election. How we prevail is the answer that only you, the people, can decide. And based on what we've heard tonight, it's important that one thing always prevails within the psyche of every American. That includes you and I, and that is trusting in God, being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, and letting hope prevail. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. Keep the faith. God bless America.